whenever you want.
Hello, I'm Kurt Bodenhausen.
And I'm Eben Novi-Williams, and this is the Bump Set Spike Sports Business Podcast, the Sporticast. All right, you heard his voice there, Kurt Bodenhausen, filling in for Scott Soshnick, who is on the road. And we are excited to talk today to Caitlin Gao, the co-founder and CEO of League One Volleyball Love. Caitlin, some big news from you guys today. Just closed a $100 million funding round. I don't see champagne in your view there, but I hope there's one nearby. Let us know. Give us the mood right now. I assume there's a lot of excitement in the love world.
Absolutely. Well, it's only, early, so, that champagne is coming later for sure. The mood is celebratory. It feels super exciting and so much anticipation for our first season at the Pro League level to kick off on ESPN on January 8th.
So Kurt and I think both have the same reaction when we heard the news originally. $100 million is a lot of money. For reference, I think the WNBA for their first ever funding round a few years ago raised $75 million. Was 100 always the number? Did you start somewhere else and eventually get to that? Walk us through why $100 million was the thing that you guys felt you needed to kind of layer on the Pro League on top of everything else you're doing.
Yeah, well, League One Volleyball Love is the first of its kind youth to pro ecosystem. No other pro league has ever started with youth first. And we have been methodically building it layer by layer, brick by brick since 2020 in the middle of COVID where we got the start. So, resilience definitely count for something. And, I think 5 years of building it with Youth Club as our foundation, just allowed us to be super strategic and methodical about how we were building the next phase, which is the Pro League phase. And so right at this juncture, literally 50 days before, 49 days, I guess, by the time this airs, before our first serve in Atlanta for the league, $100 million feel like such an amazing milestone, if you will, to really mark all of the support, all of the progress we've made that is reflected in the level of support and momentum that's going into the first season for Pro League.
So how are you thinking about implementing this capital and how putting it to work?
Yeah. Is the hard part raising or is the hard part deciding what to do with the money?
We'll ask you again in a couple of years. Yeah, it's a good
exactly.
question.
The good news is because of all of that, work over the last 5 years, we have a very clear picture of what both businesses need in terms of where that capital can fuel growth. So it will be both to invest back into the club business as well as getting the Pro League into its first, second, and future seasons.
So let's take a step back for a second. So you mentioned the League One or Love started in 2020. Sportico also started in 2020. I think we have Kurt and I have a good idea of both the opportunity and the challenges that arose in COVID and launching businesses. But walk us through the strategy here. As you said, it wasn't pro first; it was youth and club first. And I assume this was the longer term goal at some point. But walk us through the thinking in terms of what to start with when you were building the whole Love ecosystem.
Absolutely. When we were hashing this idea with a group of founders, almost to the week, if you will, just before Thanksgiving 2019, definitely didn't know COVID was coming. So there's always that. And, we very quickly honed in on the sport is so immensely popular, and yet there's really no commercialization or scale to speak of. And yet you've got 400,000 plus high school girls that are participating in the sport.
Wow.
We were just chatting earlier. I mean, there are more girls that play volleyball in the state of Ohio than boys who play football. So it's almost this best kept secret, if you will, that a lot of people didn't notice. So we really looked into that and also looked at just how immensely popular it was at the collegiate level. I mean, just last year you had 92,000 people show up to Memorial Stadium in Nebraska, and that set the record, right? I mean, those are football, numbers that you don't really think about for women's volleyball. I don't know if you can see a lot there, but it's really the spirit that counts, right? And how much
the ball's very small from the top of that
Exactly.
stadium.
Thank God for those big screens, but it's just so exciting. And then at the Pro League level, we send over 200 incredible athletes every year abroad to 40 plus professional leagues that are thriving in other countries. And yet every 4 years, Team USA continues to medal. They have medaled 20 years in a row, indoor volleyball at the Olympic level, and we are so fortunate to have built that long-term relationship. So our pro league is launching with gold medalists and silver medalists from Olympics, from Tokyo, and from Paris recently, who are headlining our pro league.
I want to talk about a little bit about the cities. You have a half dozen cities as you look towards 2025. Is that correct?
That's
In
right.
terms of where you're going to operate. How are I assume there's some strategic thought in terms of what goes into targeting these cities. How do you target them?
As all recovering consultants do, even though it's a very brief time spent at Bain& Company. Shout out to Maya and Peter's alma mater back there. We definitely looked into a lot of different aspects of how we ended up with the 6. I think there were more than a dozen aspects that we looked into, both from what was the participation rate at the youth level, as well as collegiately, how do we look at the fandom. And also, we know we're not just competing against other volleyball, we're competing against how people spend time. So not even just sports. So, how do we think about how do we capture the audience and the fan base, and where's the already great infrastructure? Now, having built the youth level for the last 5 years, we're across 26 states, over 60 club locations. So one of the biggest benefits and differentiation we have is that we get to build on top of an infrastructure that already exists. So our pros, which is very, very different than how any other league has started, will actually be practicing in the same facilities that our youth club members, athletes, will actually already be playing at. So that sort of authentic, true connection between the youth and the pro league level players, that's something that I don't think money can really buy. You don't really see that a lot built this way intentionally in the States. You do see that somewhat in soccer, if you will.
I was going to say, it sounds almost like
Yeah.
European, like big European soccer and their academy structure to a degree.
Absolutely. That's a huge inspiration for us.
So you're going to be Atlanta, Austin, Houston, Madison, Omaha, and Salt Lake. Is that right?
That's right.
And so
And did you say Madison? Yeah, you did.
Madison, Wisconsin. Yes, correct.
That's right.
And so in each of these cities, you already have a significant presence in terms of what you're doing.
We do. Those are very intricately linked and very intentionally that way.
What are some other synergies? You mentioned the facilities, but I assume that some of the young women who are playing in these clubs are probably going to be attending matches and their families. But where else do you see the way in which having a youth infrastructure already helps bolster the pro product?
Absolutely. I think that the built-in fan base is a huge one, as is this level of belonging that we are building from the youth all the way to pro and the community around it. I mean, ultimately, love stands for community and stands for belonging. And that's important because we truly believe that what we're ultimately building is actually a brand, which is somewhat different, I guess, when you look at some of even the most amazing legacy leagues. I don't know that out of the gates they were thinking that the NFL, NBA, NHL by themselves are a brand. And we very much saw that that was an opportunity for us, because once you build an ecosystem and it has a very strong and clear brand, then other offerings that come about, especially when you have a captive audience at the youth level, a community that's super engaged, and then you have this really amazing pro product that's headlined by the best players in the world that hasn't actually played on the U.S. soil before, even though they win medals. All of that means that we have these incredible IPs onto which we can generate a lot more products from, right? A lot more offering for what this audience actually deserves and never really got. You can think about the digital product of content and media. You can think about physical product of merchandise and lifestyle merchandise, and also the experiential product that goes beyond youth training and pro competition. What's the future gathering look like for all of the amateurs, like those on the screen maybe here, to participate in, that feel like you're really just part of a community, a part of a product that feels that it transcends more than just what happens on the court.
Where are you looking for inspiration, either in the sports world or elsewhere in the business world, in terms of building this kind of flywheel of kind of community and synergy?
Yeah. Out of the gates, one of my most recent roles, I was lucky enough to have led global e-commerce at Lululemon And I remember, just having been part of all sorts of different brands, old and new, mass and luxury. Lululemon really stood out in just how disciplined they were and how they build a community before they actually decide where they're going to put a store. So they'll rent out maybe 6 months and above a Subway somewhere, and just have a pop up and just invite people in, the local influencers, the people who are maybe retired Olympians, just because they wanted to, one, build that community authentically first, but also gather feedback and how should they build this for future scale. And that was definitely an inspiration for us, of starting at the youth and feeling like that was such an incredibly genuine way to build a legacy league here to last.
So-
And I would say we talked a little bit about soccer for sure. And so that helped us double down to see that there was something, even if it wasn't the US, that has worked really, really well. I mean, just look at the Premier League and all the amazing leagues abroad in soccer. And I think holistically, we are looking for inspiration from both inside and outside of sports, which is what a brand should do.
You mentioned influencers there. You guys have on your cap table some very famous athletes: Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum, Lindsey Vonn, Candace Parker, Linda Henry, owner of the Red Sox, on there as well. On that list of big names, who are you working with the most? Who has really impressed you? I'm always curious, because some athletes give a check and that's it. And then some athletes are really hands-on and want to know about the business and want to help on the marketing or whatever. I'm curious who on the cap table, big names that our listeners might know, has been most influential in helping build.
Are you trying to get me in trouble?
No, compliment a couple people.
It's like picking your favorite child.
Yes, I was not warned, but now I'm picking it up. Absolutely. Well, it's interesting. I remember our founders and we were talking briefly about this, even 2-3 years ago when we were inviting people in to join us. We said, just so you know, when you write a check, we're going to make you do work. So this is the best way to get help, is for you to pay us something and then actually also help us, because you got skin in the game. No, all joking aside, I'll take an example. Candace Parker has been just absolutely tremendous in helping us in a lot of different ways, not only in thinking about brands that we wanted to, vet out ahead of how we're thinking about the pro product launch and the partnerships there, but even just participating in our trophy challenge. She and her daughter Layla, who is a star, a budding star in volleyball, they actually came together and we together looked at all of the submissions of what our youth club had submitted for our trophy. And so, I think it's both on the substantive business side, but also just a genuine participation. Funny story, she actually equally, up until sophomore year, played basketball and volleyball. And I think she mentioned that her dad, right around junior year, said, you kind of have to pick because your schedule's getting very, very full. And of course, what did she pick? She had to pick the one that didn't have did actually have a future in professional league. And so we joke that if Love was here, maybe she would have picked differently. But, just all of her learnings in the WNBA and also the MBA of the broadcasting product, those are all learnings that we get from, folks like her, whether they're high profile or non-high profile. We really do have an incredible investor community.
How do the franchises work in terms of the cap table for the franchises? Are these all going to be owned under Love Volleyball, or are there going to be independent owners now or eventually?
Out of the gates, they are single entity and owned by League One Volleyball. Okay. We really do see that will be an evolution as we build the pro product, that over time that will switch over gradually into more sort of individual team ownership as well. We do love learning from others that have come before us. We looked at what PLL has gone through, and I won't mention any names, but maybe I have heard that that's what really got them through the first couple of years, being able to act really fast, because they also launched right around COVID as well. So
they did, yeah.
About crisis management, right? So I think it makes logical sense to all of us, right? What's the robust logic of having that first kind of ensuring parity, ensuring consistency, ensuring speed to market in the beginning that benefits everyone around, so that you have a really robust product by the time that you're gradually moving into more individual ownership.
Right. It's certainly, yeah, how the WNBA worked, and here we are now with franchises selling at incredible valuations. And how for these franchises, what's the economics? What do the economics look like? What are the revenue streams on the franchise level?
Yeah, at the franchise level, we've actually been working really hard at creating opportunities that are not just the traditional streams, but also how can we get the revenue streams to be worth even more because of our unique ecosystem setup, right? So we actually just announced Adidas, Spanx, as well as Revolve as some of our partners that are coming in already before we even have a pro product. And a lot of that momentum really does come from the fact that we have an ecosystem that's already been built over 5 years, right? Just the geographical location, the loyal engagement that's happening already at our 60 plus club locations. We have 14,000 athletes who are, the 12 to 18-year-olds and her parents, not to mention the moms and the daughters that when they grow up, they make 90% of the household decision-making on all purchases. So I think that the brands are really resonating with that and said, even though we don't actually sponsor in sports, we will do so with you because this makes sense as an ecosystem.
From an athlete standpoint, what does pay look like? Is there athlete equity? How are you thinking about what the compensation structure looks like?
Yeah, before we actually launched Pro, the last 5 years, we've been doing a ton of listening. And I still remember right around Tokyo Olympics in 21, because it was delayed a year, we were talking to those Olympians who were unfortunately in quarantine, right? And sometimes you have to do that. And it actually gave us an opportunity to really kind of go beyond the surface and really get to talk to what have they experienced having had to be, going abroad each time, not having the opportunity to play in front of their families. And what do they care about the most in terms of compensation? And of course, salaries matter. It does, right? Because you need to make sure that you can pay the bills and you're, compensated fairly. At the same time, we also heard about their experience of the things that made their performance on the court that much better, which is, benefits and treating them like not just someone on contract. And so they are actually employees. We provide much fuller benefits in addition to salary, and the salaries are quite competitive. They're already at WNBA and NWSL numbers, if not more, and they do vary by your experience, as it should, as well as the positions that you play. These are not athletes that don't have other choices. I just want to make sure that's super clear. I mean, in the Italian league, which is a very successful commercial league, the best player gets paid over $2 million. But that's actually not where she makes the most money. She makes a lot of, compensation from brands who want to sponsor her. Volleyball is an incredibly unique women's sport in that it doesn't have a big brother shadow effect.
Is there a history of professional volleyball in the United States?
There has definitely been attempts for the indoor side, for sure. Obviously, on the outdoor, there was AVP, but
right.
For us, being our focus first right now is indoor volleyball, where the majority of participation happens. There has been players that have come. There are players that are in it now. When you talk about the uniqueness of what we're building, we feel really strongly that just being authentic to who we are, which is an ecosystem, and the best pro product with the best pro players from all over the world. We have a quarter international and 75% led by USA Olympians. Those speak for themselves.
There's such an interesting kind of juxtaposition here, which we saw in women's basketball as well, where America is the largest sports economy in the world, and we have done a lot to promote women, young women particularly, playing sports more so than we have in more so than most countries. And yet you have professional leagues in other countries that for a long time were compensating female athletes so much better than the professional leagues here in the U.S. And obviously well documented how many WNBA players, at least in the past, had to play overseas in addition to playing here just to get the money that they were owed. It is interesting to hear that volleyball actually seems like at least previously has been structured similarly, where it's a huge participation thing here in the U.S., but up until recently, from a compensation standpoint, female athletes were making a lot more in places in Europe and not here.
Yeah, and I think, both not having a big brother already existing here in the U.S. Is probably one reason why it hasn't necessarily happened, before soccer did or before basketball did on the women's side. But also, we see it as an opportunity to design this and build this differently, and not just for the sake of being different, but because this is how we think we can really build a legacy that will last for generations to come.
I feel like in some ways we are in kind of the heyday of startup sports leagues in the U.S. and we've mentioned a few already on this podcast, and there's certainly many others that are popping up. And then that also in some ways also means there's more competition for young sports leagues than there ever has been in the U.S. How do you think about this moment right now where kind of the flattening of media makes distribution a fairer game for new leagues like yours, but also again there's no shortage of places you can turn for pick your sport if you're looking to watch the best in the world compete in the U.S.
Yeah. Well, personally, I think it's super exciting, and it bodes well for volleyball in particular, and also bodes well for how we are building it, which is very, very community-centric. I think if you are fighting for digital ad dollars to captivate your audience, as in the e-commerce B2C business, that's kind of race to the bottom, and the cost, you drive up the cost. I think if you can truly establish authentic grassroots engagement, you will have a differentiated outcome than others. And that's exactly why there's zero regret. If anything, we're so thankful that we've had the support from all around, both internally as well as through our investors who have said, keep doing what you're doing. Don't block out the noise. We know other people are coming in. It only means it's good things, right? And I believe that too. We're not looking at competing for this one little pie that used to be the commercial value of the sport. We're looking to actually grow way outside of that. And so that to me is really exciting times. And I think the other thing to mention about women's volleyball, this is not something that all of a sudden over the last 5 years has gotten really popular. That 92,000 people don't pop out of nowhere. It's been 50 years of Title IX driving that popularity and adoption, both at the collegiate level, that obviously then translate into youth participation. I've got 2 kids in club volleyball here in Southern California. The amount of time that I spend outside of working, my awake time, I'm spending the majority of it in that facility. And so how engaged I am to what they're doing, what your kids are doing, it's immensely important in this calculation.
You have a media rights deal with ESPN for the Pro League. How did those conversations work, and how did that relationship come together?
Interestingly, we have also experienced similar benefits of building this from grassroots up, even in the broadcast conversations, meaning that I do think that a lot of proposals for new leagues and new products come through folks' tables every day, and I think our differentiation of having already built the largest volleyball community in the country was of interest to these conversations. And for ESPN specifically, we were really excited about choosing them over others, especially because of what they've invested at the collegiate level. Those numbers just keep going up. Last year, they even had the Final Four finals on ABC because it was literally going, from a hockey stick, if you will, of just how fast it grew from the previous year. So the way that we even decided when the season was going to be was intentionally so that there's sort of this very natural movement from the collegiate season being over at the end of December. You take 10, 20 days, and then you're ready to watch pro, right? And that to us was a very natural path, a very natural arc, and therefore a very natural partner to choose. And we've, like everything else, we started talking to them, many years prior to when the deal was announced, so that they can also see how steadily and how disciplined we were about implementing what we said we would.
Caitlin, we're running low on time, but want to ask you to get you out on this. What keeps you up at night? You've now solved, at least temporarily, you've got money in hand. What are the concerns as you look around, and what are the things that are occupying the most of your time now that the raise is done?
I would say two things. The first one is, despite, us talking a little bit about how our differentiation positions us really well in this disaggregation of media, I look at my kids and their friends, and so much is happening, so much is in flux. And so I want to make sure that we are learning and pivoting and adjusting quickly, real time, because there's so much that we know we still don't know. And I'm very fortunate we have such an incredible team who are very humble but confident. We're constantly taking, inputs from what we see around and saying, how does that translate to us? So that, agility is something that's top of mind for me. And then I think the other thing here is that we've had some really amazing momentum around kind of partners and brands who are recognizing that they actually want to invest and not just say that they want to invest. And I also think that, there's still work to be done there, because it's still early stages of brands who are not just going to go the traditional route and invest in traditional properties, and that they're much more open about, really learning and building from the ground with properties that are relatively new.
Well, thank you very much, Caitlin. This was great. Congratulations again on the $100 million raise, and I'm sure we'll have you on again at some point soon to discuss all the progress as the league launches. She is Caitlin Gao. She is the CEO and co-founder of League One Volleyball. You can find them on Twitter at League One VB. Kurt Badenhausen, you can find him on Twitter at K Badenhausen. I'm Eben Novy-Williams. You can find me on Twitter at Novi_Williams. The show is produced by Aaron Greenewald. Thank you very much to Aaron. And Matt Palacio, who runs Sportico's social and digital media, would like you to know that you can follow the show at Sporticast, which is the hub of the Sportico Media Network. All right. Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you
Thank you
guys.
so much. That was great.
Yeah, it's